He's not lying. He does.
Lame sauce.
He's got to go pee while he sits down first, and then he'll go to
Guilty.
bed.
Guilty.
There it is.
Let's jam it on the one, please.
Jamming on the one.
Jamming on the one. We ready?
Yeah, whenever you are, G.
All
You're the captain of this boat. Let's
no,
go.
it's all good, man.
You're the captain of this Titanic.
I know, right?
All right, 3, 2, 1.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the UNT3 podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Gerfers, co-host Joel Cox and Christian Fisher.
What's up, everyone?
So what we do is we bring you all music all the time. We're three best friends that anytime we get together, all we do is talk about music. We can cover things from who the best guitar player in the 60s was, or who was the most influential bass player of all time. We'll even talk about different albums that are out or our favorite albums from past decades. Concerts, really, the sky is the limit. We want to bring you into this discussion. We've got some really good stuff for you this week. And so what we've been doing in the past is we've been starting to put together a super group. We're going to continue that this week with the bass player. If you tuned in last week, you saw that we picked our drummer and we went with John Bonham. So we're going to see who's going to fit well with him in that rhythm section today. So really, we'll get Christian to start us off with what bass player should be in our super group.
All right, well, I've got 3 for your consideration. I'm going to start it off. I'd be remiss if I didn't have him in my list, the one, the only Cliff Burton. I'm a huge Metallica fan. You might even say they're my favorite band. And I put him on my list, 1, because he's Cliff Burton. But 2, for someone who was only in the band for 3 years, almost 40 years into their existence, so 37 years without him, they still hold him with such reverence. The fans of Metallica, you know, there's that meme of if you had a time machine, you go back and, hey, Cliff, switch places with Lars. You know, Metallica would be, you know, this if Cliff had never died. And if you actually look up like Master of Puppets bass line, bass only, and listen to his bass lines, he wasn't that bass player that just, I'm going to follow the rhythm guitar and I'm going to, you know, just big straight line. His bass lines were, especially in the metal community, quite creative, at least I think. So he's my first. Thought I'd put my heaviest hitter right there. Second, we mentioned him last week with drummers when we talked about Danny Carey. And my second is Justin Chancellor, the bass player from Tool.
That's good.
Yeah.
He I mean, his bass line alone in the song Schism, that's the first thing I think of when I think of him. Just his bass line. Like, his bass line is the dominant force in that song. Like, it starts with the bass line, and the guitar is just a bunch of power chords, and the bass line is front and center in that song, along with the drums. You know, the drums are always front and center in Tool because of Danny.
Yeah.
But Justin is my second. And then for my third bass player, he might be on your list, Ryan. I don't know if this is the same list that we talked about earlier. Then he's not. And my third bass player is Sting.
Whoa.
Wow.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
he is not like that. So you're Justin Chancellor and Sting are not on my list. So that's fantastic.
I didn't I
Actually.
didn't I didn't think Sting would be. I thought Justin might have an outside shot. Um, but I mean, he's not normally mentioned in the conversation when you talk about the greats in bass playing, but Sting is multifaceted. He can play the bass, he can sing, right? I'm pretty
He
sure he
can
can
write songs.
Yeah.
he can write songs. I'm pretty sure he can play guitar if they ask him to. Um, but his bass lines in the Police are no joke. You know, he's
Yeah.
got some pretty tasty licks, if you will.
That's true, man. That's a great choice.
Yeah, I can't
Sting is a
argue
great
that one.
choice.
That's
Yeah.
good
So
stuff.
so those are my three for consideration.
Where are you at, Nicole?
Man, okay. So going back on what we talked in the podcast before, one of the things that I think of when I think of bass player or any utility player for a super group, one, talent, two, name recognition. Those are kind of the two easy ones. But then the third one is I always feel like the person that I want to choose is someone that I feel like will represent the song and be just a chill player, someone that has some kind of history of now again, I've never met any of these people, but just based off of stories and things of that nature, like someone like Lemmy, I left off the list. I think that would be totally awesome to have him there, but
Yeah.
I just don't think he would fit because he was who he was, kind of like Les Claypool and some of those players. You know, Cliff that's a great outside the box player because he was a utility player, but he was also unique, but you know that he was going to play to the song.
Right.
So that's great. I mean, that's a great player. So the three people that I have to go along with John Bonham is going to be John Paul Jones. Just, I mean, the rhythm section of Led Zeppelin. I mean, and of course he was in Them Crooked Vultures.
Yeah.
And plus, he's done session work, so you know that whatever happens, he can still play. He can play keys. He can, he seems like a very chill player.
What I like about John Paul Jones is just one, his versatility, and two, his professionalism. Like know, if he's in the band, he's got it locked down. Whatever you ask him to do, he's going to do, and he's going to do it really well.
Yeah, and if you think about like Them Crooked Vultures with Josh Homme and
Dave Grohl.
Dave Grohl, I mean, he just did his thing, and I saw them on TV or on YouTube. Kids, YouTube has a lot of live videos. It's great, but I saw them on YouTube, and you just could tell, like even at his age now, being with Led Zeppelin, he still loved playing, like the smile on his face. I mean, that's just, so that's kind of an out. I don't think we'll choose him, but I think you have to put him on this list.
Well, is he on the overall list, Ryan?
That will be coming here shortly.
Well, all right.
Mr. Numbers guy. The second guy that I put on here is just a personal favorite. Tim Comerford from Rage Against the Machine. I just love him, man. He's just, I don't know. He just seems like, if you've seen, what's that Rush documentary where he talks
Beyond
about.
the Lighted Stage.
Yeah, he goes to talk to Neil Peart, and they won't let him back there because they're like, you're too much of a nerd. Like he still loves music, but yet he grooves and he plays. And I don't know. I'd love to see him in another group other than Rage. But
he was an Audio Slave.
But that's Rage with Chris Cornell. So let's call it what it is. But either way, I mean, he's still an awesome bass player.
Well, you could argue that the lead singer for Rage with Chris or Rage with why can't I think of his name?
Zach De La Rocha.
Yeah, the lead singer set the tone of that band.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
But they groove the same. I mean, they
in some of the stuff they did.
That's true.
I would the thing I like about him though is he's another solid. He's just a solid bass player.
And he seems like he'd be pretty chill. I mean, except for when he's crawling on top of things at the MTV Music
Or
Awards.
throwing the bass up in the air and letting it hit him in the face.
No, that was Nirvana. That was Chris Novoselic who did that.
Okay.
He did it with Nirvana where he threw it up and he knocked himself out. So, but I mean, he just seems like he'd be a super chill guy. This guy I added to my list I'm sorry, I ended up having 4, sorry. But Pino Palladino, he's a session guy. There's all these session guys. Yeah, I mean, he played with John Mayer. He's played with a ton of people. But just a super solid bass player. He can play funk, jazz, rock. I mean, there's all these studio guys we can name, and then jazzers. But I try to keep it with like kind of the rock vein. So what I settled on as my last pick is Billy Sheehan. I just think, with Tallis, David Lee Roth, Mr. Big, I mean, he can sing, he can play, he's done the studio thing. He's a phenomenal player. Like he can literally he can keep up with Paul Gilbert.
Yeah.
And if you haven't listened to any of the playing, the first 2 songs off the first 2 Mr. Big albums are just stupid ridiculous as far as bass playing, because they do these harmony things together. And anyone who doesn't know who Paul Gilbert is, go check it out. It's a little dated as far as, when it came out, but the playing on it is just phenomenal. But Billy Sheehan, it just seems like he's the type of guy that he can just walk in any situation and he can handle it. So
he's another John Paul Jones.
Yeah, and I mean, in a way, yeah. So I mean, those are my pick.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, since Joel got 4, I want to add one more so that I can have 4. And I don't think this guy made anybody's list. I don't think he's on Ryan's list. I know he's not. Well, you just gave us your list, so I know he's not on yours.
Yeah, it's on one.
But my 4th, Kip Winger.
Oh! I actually he was on my list because he was a utility player before he formed Winger. So
yeah.
And not only that, but he can sing. He can dance.
Well, because that's
important. Hey, have you seen the flips he does in 17? Go watch that video. He kicks his leg out and everything while he plays.
Oh yeah, but
he was doing the Garth Brooks mic before anybody else did.
Yeah, Kip Winger. Kids, look him up.
Wow.
I'm not being serious with that pick, but.
Oh really? He's a great bass player.
Hey,
oh man.
He's not bad.
He's not bad, but dude, watch the video for 17. Watch him do that little kickflip while he sings with his Garth Brooks mic.
That is definitely a song that would have got me too'd if it came out today.
There's a lot of things that would have been me too'd. Anyway, so this is the point where Gurfers, the numbers man, gives us his top 20 bass players to see who made the list, and then we'll kind of go from there. Oh,
we're
21?
actually going to make it 21.
Wow.
Okay. So I think this is going to be the first week that we probably will have a 3-way tie because nobody's going to pick the same bass player.
Ooh.
So
nice.
we're gonna have a little discussion here. But real quick, so 21. Now again, some of these names I know for a fact we are not going to pick for our supergroup. But
Sure.
I think it's only fair to the listeners that are out there. One of these guys that I'm about to name off may be your favorite and maybe in your supergroup. And so I want to give nods to these players on this list. And who knows, I may throw a name out there that, Joel or Christian didn't think of in the moment, and they may be like, wow, that's the guy right there.
Yeah.
The first one, and keep in mind, sorry, this is in no particular order. So the list that I put together, it's not, I'm going from worst to best. I'm just going off of research. So, this one I added to the list. One of my coworkers, I coach with him here at the high school locally. He actually plays bass. And I asked him, who are your top 3? And he threw a name out there that was not on this list. And when I did some research on it, it deserves to be here. The name is James Jamerson. he basically played with the Funk Brothers, and he pretty much, from everything I've seen, if you're into Motown, he basically founded Motown from everything that I've read. Any of the big Motown hits in the 60s, he was playing bass on those. And so really that big Motown movement, and there's a lot of bass players on the list that I'm going to read off that I was reading. They said that James really kind of was a pioneer in bass playing. And they kind of, I don't want to say he was their inspiration, but they definitely took some of the things that he did and some of the techniques that he brought to the table, and they added it into what they did. So I think it's only fair that his name is on this list. I mean, if you're being looked at as the, godfather of Motown with the bass, I think it's only fair that your name get brought up.
Mm-hmm.
Another name, and this guy, I'm going to go ahead. I'll pick 4, like you guys did. This will be one of my official picks. Will be Chris Squire from Yes.
Mm.
Okay. I mean, just go listen to Roundabout and tell me that he doesn't deserve a nod. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
And then you've got Steve Harris, Iron Maiden.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right? I mean, it is what it is. And then, so bass player from Talking Heads. Do y'all know who that is?
It's a
I
woman.
can see her. I can see her face.
Yeah,
Tina Weymouth.
yeah, she has a bob.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, Tony Levin,
Yeah.
King Crimson, Stickman.
Yeah.
I mean,
be careful mentioning that name on YouTube.
As long as we don't play any of their music, we're fine.
You got to be careful of King Crimson.
and
They
then
are notorious blockers.
Yeah.
and then you've got, of course, the current bass player of Metallica, Robert Trujillo.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, go watch the dude play. If you live under a rock and you don't listen to Metallica, just go watch the dude play.
Well, and look up his band's Suicidal Tendencies, Infectious Grooves, what he did with Ozzy when he played with Ozzy.
Yeah.
So I mean,
and you can also look up. There's he's the one who owns Jocko's bass, and watch the documentary on
he
him
was the
acquiring
guy.
that.
He was the main driving force behind that documentary.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's cool about Robert, it goes along with everybody. And of course, I can't. Some of these people, I've heard that the girl from Talking Heads is difficult. Some of these other people, I don't. The guy from Motown, from what I understand, they're just they did their job and they went home. But like with Robert, he. If you watch the interviews with him, he understands his role in Metallica is not to be Infectious Grooves or any of the other bands that he's been in. It's to be the bass player for Metallica. And I think that that's a huge testament to the quality of bass player that he is. Plus, he just seems
some
like
might argue is an oxymoron.
Which means what?
Bass player in Metallica.
Oh. But I think that that's what's so cool about him is he just, like everything that I've seen, he just gives off the quality of it. He is the happiest guy to be. Jason was excited, but Jason also got riffed on. But Robert just seems like he's just so thankful to be in that situation.
Jason was super fan, right?
Yeah.
And they've gone on record before saying they wanted to beat the fan out of him, right? Mm-hmm. And so for 14 years he was the brunt of everything.
Yeah.
And then Robert comes in and, like you said, he's just like, yeah, I'm thankful to be here. And at that, and of course entering the band at different times of their lives, maturity levels are different. So, and he also didn't have to follow Cliff.
That's true. Well, they got it. I mean, of course, counseling helps too. But anyway, so Gurfers, who else is on your list?
So the next one on the list is going to come from a massive band, huge band that we haven't actually mentioned on any of our podcasts yet. It will be the bass player from Queen.
Oh,
John Deacon.
Yeah.
I mean,
I almost put him on my list.
And so I think he deserves a nod. And then Joel mentioned this bass player, Motorhead, Lemmy. And then we'll kind of stick with that kind of genre of music. Geezer Butler or Black Sabbath.
Yeah, I thought about putting him on mine.
I mean, let's see. Well, who else we got here? Peter Hook.
Who's Peter Hook? Who do Peter
Joy
Hook
Division, New Order.
Oh,
Joy Division. Right on, man.
Okay, that kind of 80s.
One of the few times Joy Division will get brought up on this show.
And then
not the last, I'm sure.
This
That's why I
next
said
one,
few.
Joel already talked about. What is it? Billy Sheenan.
Billy Sheenan, yeah.
Yeah. And then Victor Wooten.
Oh, yeah. But see, Victor Wooten is his own thing.
Yeah, I was just about to say he's right there in that category of the Jaco Pastoriuses and and Primus. Why can't I think of his name?
Les Claypool.
Les Claypool.
So we'll get into what I would consider, like I called it with the drummers. I call this list would be the whales, the probably the bigger names. One of which Christian had on his list was Cliff Burton. Okay. Jack Bruce.
Yeah.
I mean,
he can sing and play. Yeah. Cream. Yeah.
Jack Bruce is there. Christian's mentioned this name for the next one. Jaco Pastorius.
Yeah.
John Paul Jones, which was on Joel's list. We've named Les Claypool several times. The one name that I haven't heard brought up yet. Now, Les Claypool was my second pick, one of my picks. So that's 2 of the 4.
Okay.
The next name that I'm going to put up is an official pick. I haven't heard this name mentioned yet. I may have fallen asleep if y'all did. Is Geddy Lee.
Oh yeah.
No, we haven't mentioned him.
I
But
didn't
again,
mention him,
I put Geddy in that like he's his own thing list, right? For the supergroup discussion. At least in my mind, I don't know about the 2 of you, but I try to stay away from the more progressive players. Once you get in that progressive pool, that area of playing, you kind of, your bass lines are going to be really out there and cool, but is it going to serve the song that you're playing in, or the band that you're playing in? More importantly, you got a monster back there on the drums, and are you going to be able to lock in with him and do what's needed? So
yeah, and that's why I stayed with the jazz players. Like, there's a ton of jazz bass players I could have added, but that's the main reason why I stayed away from those guys. Yeah.
So you've got 3 of your 4.
So there's 3 names left.
Can I guess one?
Sure.
Is Flea on your list?
Yes. And yes, Flea is on the list.
Flea.
John Entwistle from The Who.
Yeah.
God.
And then here, I mean, this is not my pick. Flea is my 4th pick.
Okay. Yeah.
But this name here, we have not talked about today yet. Paul McCartney of the Beatles. I mean.
Now, when we had this discussion a few months back on your back porch, Ryan, we ended up going with Paul.
We did go with Paul.
We ended up going with Paul. So it'll be interesting to see if we stick with him.
If I remember correctly, a few months back, we chose Paul mostly, and I'm not saying solely, but mostly on name recognition alone and how popular he was and how everybody would know who he is.
And the fact that he can write.
And then, yes, and then at the same time, you got pretty much a second front man with Paul being your bass player. And so if we're looking for utility and versatility, I mean, Paul is right at the top of that list.
But I would argue that you get that in my 3rd pick in Sting.
Sure.
You get the songwriting and the singing and the versatility with Sting.
So
Maybe not as prolific, but you get the same thing.
Sure. If I'm going to pick one of my guys, like if I had to pick one of my guys that's just in your face, he's just going to lay it all out there, and he's just badass to watch play. I'm going Flea.
Yeah, I was about to say, you can go.
I'm going Flea all day long. I mean, the dude can play. And all of these guys that I named that are still alive to this day, almost every single one of them said that Flea is near the top of their lists. And so, I mean,
He's not a bad pick.
Flea, you got to think, rhythm section, Flea with John Bonham behind him there on the drums. I mean, that's
Two different styles, though.
that's okay.
Yeah. Well, but they both groove, though. I mean, that's the thing. Like, and the thing you also have to remember, like, Flea can play other instruments as well. I mean,
Yeah.
he can write too.
He's versatile.
And his drumming, or the drummer that he's been playing with, is similar to that kind of bombastic John Bonham styles.
I'm kind of surprised he didn't make any of our lists last week. Chad
Smith?
Yeah. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about that today on the way home from work.
Yeah, Chad Smith slash...
We left some good drummers off the list last week.
Well, and that's the problem with any of these lists that, and he seems like a guy that can hang with people, but, John Bonham's who we got, so we're just going to stick with it. No, we're not going back. We're forging ahead.
Cool. I'm cool with who we picked on.
I'm cool, Daddy. Chill, Daddy, chill.
So, so Chris Squire, Les Claypool, Geddy Lee, and Flea. I'm picking Flea as my into the ring. So, like, Joel, you picked 4. Who's your guy that you would throw into the ring against Flea?
Well, I think that being reminded of our previous discussion, I think I'm going to switch my pick, and I'm going to go with Paul McCartney. I'm going to switch it. I'm going Paul McCartney.
Flip flopper.
I think that someone who is able to listen to others and make an educated pick is much better. So I'll be a flip flopper, but I'm going to go with Paul McCartney just because I did forget about
your original picks.
Oh no, and I mean the other guys that I picked are great too, but I think that would be. I mean, and I would be happy with him or Flea either way. So. What about you?
Since you changed your pick to Sting, or not Sting, to Paul McCartney, that kind of nullifies my pick in Sting because I was going to go Sting originally.
Okay.
So I'm going to go with what I know, and I'm going to go with Cliff.
Okay. Okay.
Bell bottom wearing monster on the bass.
Okay, so now we have a stalemate. So how are we gonna figure this out, guys?
Well, I mean, I ain't got nothing to do tonight.
Well, let's do this. Who has the most Instagram followers? That takes Cliff out of the argument.
Yeah.
Well, dude, he was dead long before Instagram.
Well, way before social media and all that.
Well,
that's below the belt.
Well, the thing about Cliff, though, is, I mean, I think what Fisher said is something to really take consideration is he only played with Metallica for a short period of time, and yet he's still regarded as, I mean, in most cases, the Metallica sound. I mean, he was the one who basically, I think it's funny because he taught them how to harmonize. He taught them how to understand the classical side of what became their music. And I mean, if you listen to Master of Puppets, I mean, that's orchestration. That's not, I mean, it's heavy and the lyrical content is such, but that's just orchestra. The way everything swells of the guitars, the instrumental that's on there, Orion. I mean, it's, and that's
which was all him, by the way.
Yeah, that's all Cliff. And I mean, you know, there's no wah in there, which I think that's part of. I'm just kidding. We'll talk about that later. But I think that. I mean, that is something to be said as far as, I mean, Cliff, he was a monster. But, you know, the thing is that, I mean, Flea is a monster as well. I mean, he's been with the Chili Peppers for how long? He's done the funk thing. He's done the rock thing. He
played in Jane's Addiction for a little bit.
He played in Jane's Addiction, and that's a straightforward rock band with a lot of combustion. So, I mean, it shows
most underrated band of the 90s.
Okay, well, that we'll come back to that, but add it to the list. If you would like to see an episode of us talking about the best of the 90s, underrated
most
90s
underrated.
Bands. Sorry, most underrated 90s bands. Put it in the comments. But I mean, that does show that he has versatility. He can do the rock stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, he can handle a personality like Dave Navarro, but he can also do the stuff with. I mean, Anthony Kiedis was a major drug addict. I mean, he was. I mean, and he helped him get clean. I mean, he helped him through all that. So
And John Frusciante.
And John Frusciante, and I mean, it definitely does. I mean, that is something to kind of argue. And then, of course,
John
Paul
doesn't
McCartney is. I mean, Paul McCartney is who Paul McCartney is. I mean, there's
John
really nothing to
Frusciante
say.
doesn't come back to do Californication if it's not for Flea.
Yeah,
Flea was the one that reached out to him and said, "Hey, come back to the band."
And
So-
let's not forget that Flea played one hell of a tattoo artist in the movie Son-in-Law. Just saying.
Hey, the other thing to remember, though, on a serious note, is Flea was the bass player for Alanis Morissette's album Jagged Little Pill. He
Okay.
played. I mean, he played on "You Ought to Know." That's his bass playing. So he played with Taylor
Yeah.
Hawkins, and if I'm correct, I think
Fact
John
check that,
Frusciante
Gurper.
played on that too. So
Fact check that.
I'm almost
What?
certain he's in the video. I could be
Yeah.
wrong.
That Flea played with Alanis Morissette.
Jagged Little Pill.
Well, hey, while you're fact checking on that, I know for a fact he played on "You Ought to Know." The other thing, though, is he also played the bass line in Young MC's Principal's Office, and what's the first track off
Sounds like
there?
you're making the case to have Flea in our supergroup there, Joel.
Well, I'm just saying he plays a myriad of songs. Am I right?
He right now Flea plays bass, and Dave Navarro plays guitar on "You Ought to Know."
Okay.
On Jagged Little Pill.
I tell you, I don't know a lot about things, but I do know.
But what I do, but what I do know.
But what
Right
you know
on.
what I don't know is that Michael Jackson's Thriller album was in 1982. but I mean,
It's all right.
I mean, I'm, you know, I'm gonna switch with Gurpers, man. I think I'm gonna go Flea. I think I talked myself into it.
Well, I guess I'll be the holdout. I'm still holding with Cliff. So
Okay, well, 2
And
to
so-
3. I mean, 2 to 1.
This is the point in the podcast to where down on that corner it says Flea 2, and down on that corner it says Cliff 1, and then we have a banner up top saying "Winner, winner, chicken dinner."
Do you want it to like flash too?
Okay, so begrudgingly, with one person on this podcast, we're going to go with Flea in our supergroup. Is this what we're doing?
That's
hey,
what we're doing.
I got outvoted. So
Well, let me tell you this.
but
Cliff is great.
I cannot. I mean, we're splitting hairs now, right? Like going off of Gurfer's list, going off the ones that we brought. I mean, and again, just my opinion, minus the guys who are on the more progressive side, you couldn't really go wrong, at least in my opinion.
Sure.
Yeah.
They all are very unique and bring certain things to the table. And so I really can't argue with Flea.
So, I mean, that's one hell of a rhythm section. John Bonham and
Yeah.
Flea. So, yeah, we've got some work ahead of us to get some kick-ass guitar players in front of them and a front man. But,
Or a kick-ass guitar player and a keyboard player.
you know, let's
I'm
go.
just ready for the flute.
Come
This
on.
isn't Jethro Tull,
And then we can always
bastards.
get Will Ferrell and Christopher Walken to bring us some cowbell if we need it.
Hey,
That's
I'm
true.
all for the cowbell.
Let's go, you know.
When you were talking about Chad Smith, I was like, Chad Smith or
Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell, they look the same.
Look up the Will Ferrell Chad Smith drum battle on the Tonight Show on YouTube. It's pretty funny.
So, John Bonham and Flea will
Yep.
bring y'all another member to the super group in our next show. But right now, I believe, Christian, you've got us another first listen this week.
I do.
Let's see what we got.
So this is probably going to fit the spirit of this segment more than last week's pick, even though Joel hadn't heard last week's pick. But the whole spirit of this segment was bringing a first listen for Ryan, right? That's the whole spirit of this segment. And I am going to play a song by a band named Elbow, if you are familiar with them. This is off their album, The Seldom Seen Kid, and it's a song called Grounds for Divorce. Joel, have you heard it?
I'm not good with their names, but I'm sure I have. If it's off the first album?
This album came out in 2008.
Okay. And then I probably have heard it, yeah.
All right, let me do that. If it'll play. There we go.
Mondays is for drinking to the seldom seen kid. I've been working on a cocktail called Grounds for Divorce. Whoa, polishing a compass that I hold in my sleeve. Whoa, down comes in on sticks, but then he kicks like a horse. Whoa, there's a Chinese cigarette case, and the rest you can keep, and the rest you can keep, and the rest you can keep. There's a hole in my neighborhood down which of late I cannot help but fall. There's a hole in my neighborhood down which of late I cannot help but fall. Mondays is for drinking to the seldom seen kid.
All right, thoughts so far?
Gurfers?
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. The as it was building up, if that was in my truck and I'm driving down the road, I would have changed the station. But I'm glad you let it keep going, because when it hit and the buildup paid off there, I mean, that's good stuff. And so it's just funny that we do the bass player for the Supergroup tonight, and right now the line sticking out to me is the bass line in this little, so this is good stuff. I like it.
All right, let's continue. Speaking of bass,
There's this whispering of jokers doing flesh by the pound to a chorus of supposes from the little town horse that we twisted karaoke at the Aniseed Lounge. And I bring you feather roses, but it does you no good, and it does me no good, and it does you no good. There's a hole in my neighborhood down which of late I cannot help but fall. There's a hole in my neighborhood down which of late I cannot help but fall. There's a hole in my neighborhood down which of late I cannot help but fall.
yeah.
Someday we'll be drinking with the seldom seen kid.
And that's grounds for divorce.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I find it interesting that every time I found myself going, okay, I've heard enough. They bring you back in because I mean, they just it all hits again right at that moment where I'm ready to check out. They bring me back in,
Yeah.
So well, that's good stuff. There was one little section too that it was almost like I don't know if it was a little keyboard, but like real high up atop everything else, there was this nice little like keyboard little line happening, which
Yeah.
was kind of cool. So yeah, no, I out of all of the first listens that we've had on this podcast so far, this one's been my favorite.
I see what you did there.
I win.
We'll have more good first listens. The whole thing about the first listens is that's exactly what it is to expose not just Ryan. Of course, Ryan's the kind of primary target, but to expose people to music that they may or may not have heard yet.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of the first album. This is not on the first album.
No.
I'll be honest with you. The first part of the song, what it sounded like to me was Perhaps Today. Like I was listening to it, and I was thinking, song. Perhaps Today, and I was like, oh my gosh. Which I'm not a big fan of.
That song.
Well, but I mean, go look it up later. But I'm not a big fan of that song, and I played on it, so take it for what it is. But then once it kicked in, I agree totally with. Once it kicked in, from that point forward, I was hooked on the rest of the song.
Yeah.
If I would have been in my car, had you not played this for me, I would have turned it off. I would have been done by the first. There was like 2 verses at the beginning, but I love the bass line. I love the drums that are behind it. I love the vocal line. The band is a great band anyway, which is so funny because this sounds more like Arctic Monkeys in a way to me, more than Elbow. That kind of driving, distorted bass line kind of thing. But I liked it. So I have nothing but props. So congratulations, Fisher. You did well this week.
What can I say? Hey, I did well last week too.
Oh yeah, well, but I mean that's kind of like saying, hey, listen to this Zeppelin track or listen to this Beatles track or playing Radiohead is. I mean, I don't care. You pick the worst track. I mean, maybe Pablo Honey, but you pick your worst Radiohead track, and it's still better.
I'm in the minority, I think, but I like Pablo Honey. I think it's a good album.
I think it's a good stepping stone. But like for me,
it's a decent introduction to the band. Like it's a decent debut album.
It's an alternative rock album. I think it was, hey, we like these guys, they have talent. But then the Bends came out and it changed the game. Like the Bends, but that's a whole other debate.
That's a whole nother podcast.
We could talk about Radiohead till the cows come home, as they say here in Texas. So,
yeah.
But that was good stuff, man.
Awesome.
Not bad.
So, hey, real quick, everybody, tell us what you think. We'd love to get your feedback. I know we haven't talked much about it today, but let us know what you think about the bass player that we chose. If there's a bass player that you think should have been on the list, if you heard a name and you're like, hey, this is the guy that should be on there, put it in the comments section. We'd love for you to follow us. So as new episodes come out, we're trying to crank one out a week for y'all because we love doing this and we'd love to get y'all's feedback. So anything that you'd like to hear, and of course, as Fisher mentioned earlier, most underrated band of the 90s, and so on. If you want to talk about the VMA performance from last night or lack thereof.
Rather not.
Kidding. Anyway, but if you'd like to talk about those things, I mean, we'd love to discuss those things because, like we've mentioned before, we love music and we'd love to hear back from you. So, hit subscribe, if I can say subscribe, hit subscribe, put some comments in the notes. Let us know what you think.
Smash that like button. All right, it's reached that time of the show where I shout out a couple of YouTube channels that I watch and follow on a regular basis that kind of inspired me to kind of kickstart this show. And in I guess celebration of the bass player that we talked about tonight, a channel that I think it's a great channel. It's he's a phenomenal bass player, and the guy's funny. The channel is Davey504. Check him out. He's a guy out of Italy. He does a lot of it's a meme channel basically with bass, and the guy, like, people challenge him to bass playoffs, and he's known for slapping the bass, right? That's his thing, slap the bass.
Slapping the bass.
And he's just he's a really good bass player. Think Flea. He plays a lot like Flea, or the guy from Yes. Like, he would be in that vein of bass players. And then my second channel, I've been following this guy for 7-8 years now, and I can't believe I forgot him last week during the drummer discussion. It's a channel called by the name of John Q, and he does drum covers. He does a lot of Rush, Tool. He does some original stuff too, but mainly drum covers. So give him a look and see what you think.
All right, guys. So again, just kind of recap today, we had a fantastic first listen. By far the best first listen so far.
It's fantastic. Right. It's so nice.
It was phenomenal.
That bleeped perfectly.
Absolutely phenomenal. It's such a great word. I rarely have a chance to use it in a sentence. Anyway, last week we had John Bonham as our Supergroup drummer. This week we were able to get Flea with him in our Supergroup. We're going to continue the Supergroup trend. What we're going to be looking at for our next show will be picking a rhythm guitar / keyboard player. So tune in for that discussion, because that one, I don't want to say it's going to get heated, but it'll definitely probably be a lot more in-depth, and we may have to take a little bit longer to come to a decision on a rhythm guitar player, because there's so many good ones out there. Another be coming down the pipe is going to be a segment where we talk about songs that have a memorable moment in them. They may have a great intro, and then the rest of the song just was flat, or it may have had a really killer opening lick, or it may have had a great drum solo in it, but the rest of the song just kind of sucked, for a lack of better terms. So we're going to talk about songs that had a memorable moment, but the rest of it just fell flat. We're also going to bring back another first listen. I believe Joel's going to be bringing that one next week. A future first listens down the road, I may start bringing in some classical and country style music. Stay tuned for that. I don't want
Can't
to
wait.
We're going to open this up to more than just some
good music.
We tend to be leaning a little more towards the rock, the kind of the rock thing. We're going to open it up. We'll do country, we'll do classical, we'll do jazz, funk, whatever. So be tuned in. Stay tuned for maybe some classical or country first listens. But as always, we love having you here. Keep tuning in. Again, comment in the section below if you've got a segment that you want us to talk about. If it's something that we haven't done before, guys, we want you to do this. We want you to talk about that. Let us know, and we will absolutely do what we can to make it happen for you. Again, tune in next week. We'll see you later. Peace.
Too much metal for one hand.
That's lame. He goes, you better get that water.
You literally froze like this,
Yeah, we were.
and then you're like, and we're like,
Oh yeah.
Keyboards.